welcome. Thanks for coming out tonight to hear our presentation on HIV process, procedures, and prevention. So I'm going to be presented by myself and Mr. Forte, and we're just going to go through some of our procedures, but we also want to communicate to you some of the things that have been going on this year. We've done a lot of new programs. We're excited about, in terms of the prevention piece, that's really something we focus on a lot. Really our ultimate goal is. So we wanted to give that update to you now that we're into February, how it's going this year.
I wasn't going to use the mic, then I realized it's kind of loud with those walls.
Yeah. So
So we'll use it just so everybody can hear. So I usually go to like maybe one CPAC meeting a year. Last year I went to one, and during the CPAC meeting it came up that it would be nice to have someone explain the processes and procedures that the district has put in place for HIV. Not only what we do when it happens, but what do we do to stop it and prevent it? All this different part. So we decided let's do it at a CPAC meeting and let's invite everybody if they would like to come to hear it. But I'm going to get to this in a minute, but we have a website that has almost everything you can imagine to deal with HIV, with our stuff, with resources and all this other information on our website. As a matter of fact, we're recording this, and this will be placed on our website and in the Friday folder, so people who aren't here can at least see it. I thought since what happened this week, I would start with a little discussion about safety and security, because I'm sure everybody's a little on edge about what's going on in the country. There's some things, obviously right now, it's also hard to understand what's real, what's not real. One of the things that I've seen is there have been 8 shootings, not 18, I know there's been 18 they said, but there's been 8 shootings since January 1st. That's a lot of shootings. I don't see the need to try to embellish that to make it 18. To me, 8 is a real lot. 1 is a lot. One of the things we talk about here with the board, with the staff, is it's a shame that it takes 17 deaths for everybody to bring this up. So we never forget this. We don't stop talking about this. We don't stop thinking about it. We don't stop doing things to try to get better, ever. My take on school security and safety is it's not one thing, it's not 2 things, it's not 5 things, it's everything. Everything that you can imagine is involved in keeping the kids safe and secure. It's mental health. It's training of staff, it's security, it's all different types of ways you can harden targets. It's relationship with police, it's relationship with kids, it's relationships with the parents. It's all of that is all part of our security practices. So when somebody says, well, what do you do? I say, everything. You name it, we have to do it. We have to always remember that it's very important to us and that it never just goes away. So we do something called ALICE in this district. I'm not sure if you got a chance to see me on Channel 4 News last week, but we were interviewed. By the way, if you go home and you have Channel 12, we'll be on today, Channel 12. One of the things we did was we started something called ALICE about 3 years ago. We were one of the first districts, I think we were actually the first district in northern New Jersey. There was a district in southern New Jersey that started this, but it's something from the Midwest. It stands for like an alert system. It's about giving people choices. Before, we always made the staff, and we even have some staff in here that can remember this, you locked down, period. There was no second choice. It was locked down. If the entire wall that you're locking down is glass, you're still locked down. To me, that's not really a great solution. When we studied some of the events that have happened over the years, we realized, wow, if the people had the choice to make a decision, they could have done something else. But they were trained to stay here. And if you look at Columbine, it's a perfect example of how, example in this room right here. So in the old way, everybody would hide under those tables, and if you know, remember, you know there's somebody outside that door killing people. You would just hide under those tables, and if he comes in, you just stay there. Instead, you're like, well, maybe we could just run out that door over there. But they were trained just to stay there. So what we're doing is empowering our staff to make decisions. We can't make them for them because there's a million different possibilities, right? Guy comes in that door, what do you do? Guy comes in that door, what do you do? So you have to just think about all the different possibilities. And we train this with the staff. We're getting to be more comfortable with the whole idea that you have a choice. It's not just lock. And the choices really are 3 things. Run. If you can't run, you hide. If you can't run or hide, then you have to fight. You have to do something to try to survive. And it's horrible to talk about this. When I first started my career 28 years ago, would I think I'd ever be sitting up here talking about teaching people how to fight? No. But you have to give people the power and empower them to try to survive. And we've actually partnered with Blue Titan, and we've done workshops with Blue Titan, which teaches Krav Maga, which is an Israeli fighting system. We don't get involved in all the real details of it, but it's just the whole idea of survival. We do staff PD. We work with St. Clair's for mental health. We did a professional development with the staff this year on finding the signs and symptoms that you should report. We also use St. Clair's if a child is exhibiting signs that they may harm themselves or others. We don't second guess. We don't talk about how much it costs. We don't say, I don't want to send this kid here because it costs money. Our principals all know, send them, then tell me. You don't need to call me for permission. We have it all set up. Ms. Johnson set it all up. It's real smooth. Kids' parents go over there. They have a form. They have to be seen, and they cannot return to school until the risk is complete by risk assessment is completed by one of their psychiatrists. And we have had a couple times where the kids don't come back because they have some mental issues that need to be corrected that we can't do it. We really can't address at the public school. So again, security, not sure how much you know about our security. I don't tell everything about this, but we have cameras. We now have armed Class 3 officer, which is a recently retired police officer. We're doing some construction that's up there. We're going to have security vestibules in each school. So basically you get level 1 clearance to come in and then level 2. You're going to have to be buzzed in twice if you're a visitor to our schools. And if you're coming just to drop something off, you only get buzzed in once. You leave it and you go. It's not going to be walking around the school. So even though we're very diligent about it now, we're going to raise that level next year with the security vestibules. The construction should start on that in late June. And we have a great relationship with the police. The chief and I were talking today. Neither of us make a decision about security without talking to the other. I saw today that the mayor of Mawa just decided to put a police officer in all the schools and didn't even tell the schools. So I was like, that's a different level of cooperation. We have an amazing level of cooperation here. It's so good that you don't even realize, the kids don't even know, they don't care that there's cops in the school. You think they might, but they don't. As a matter of fact, one of our board members texted me, anything going on at Lakeview? No, it's just a drill. We got 8 police cars there. Right? Nobody else cares, but we got a drill. And the good thing is, kids love the fact that the cops are in the school, and they don't feel threatened by them or scared or anything. In the beginning, it kind of was like that, but now it's just gotten to its second nature. We have something called Go Guardian. You've signed this if your child has a Denville account. So we're basically monitoring your child's activity when they're logged onto our account on one of our devices or your device. If they're logged onto a Denville account, we're monitoring them for self-injurious behavior or harm to others. So in other words, if somebody types in, I did this because I wanted to test it. So I had our director of technology on the line. I said, I'm going to type in right now, video on how to hang yourself. So that's exactly how I typed it in. She said, well, it popped right up. So we monitor those things. An email comes and we know that somebody's looking at information on that. We also get the other stuff like Victoria's Secret catalog and stuff like that. And we can deal with that later. We don't see that as such a pressing problem, but we do see somebody talking about harming themselves. And then this is a really big piece too. We do a lot about character. We work with the United Way. Today I got a chance to meet with the people from the YEA, which is a group out of St. Elizabeth's, right? St. Elizabeth's College, the one in Morristown. I got a chance to look at some of the data. It was really interesting. The students took a survey, and there was one data point that I found to be really positive on our side, and it was also something that they pointed out. It said, on a scale of 1 to 5, so it was like a Likert scale. So our children bullied in Valley View. There was a 2 out of 5. So obviously, we like to have that lower. 1 is the lowest. You can't have a 0. You have to have a 1. So 2 is the next up. But the thing that I thought was really good was 4.2. It said children are aware of what to do when they're bullied, how to cope with bullying. So we had a 2, yes, they're bullied, and we had a 4.2 of sometimes there's a bullying issue, but we know how to solve it, we know how to get help. So I thought that was a pretty good sign. Before I move on to anything dealing with HIV, I figured I'd open it up to you because you may be concerned right now and not really know exactly what we're doing. I put out information, but I don't tell everything. And if you have a specific question, I can answer now about security or feelings on safety of the students. Mike is board president. I'm sure he can speak up in a second and say that we do talk about this all the time. Because I always say security is everything. It's the #1 most important thing we do. Believe it or not, it's more important than anything else we do. More important than reading. I know I'm a superintendent saying that, but keeping the kids safe is more important than anything, as well as the staff. And I think our staff knows that. We do talk about it a lot. So here's a little bit on the background of the HIV law. So everybody knows that there was an incident in Rutgers. Tyler Clementi committed suicide. The legislature put together a law, and then they amended it in 2012. So some of the things that are required are training, annual training, reporting. All cases are reported to the Board of Ed and the NJDOE. The superintendent reports to the public twice per year. I do notice this. If anybody looks at some of the things I do, and I put out notices so everybody knows, twice a year I do a report on what's called HIB, harassment, intimidation, bullying, /EVERS, which just means it's a violence and vandalism report. Violence and vandalism includes anything like a weapon at school. Some of you might have seen today that there was a post out there that said these 500 and some schools had weapons, and all the schools in Denville had one. We did. But, also like a pocket knife is considered a weapon. And not everybody does report this, but we're pretty honest about it. If a kid gets caught with a pocket knife in school, we confiscate it and tell their parent. There's almost always a good reason. I want you to know that we find this to be something that can be not a big deal, and it can be a big deal. To me, it's a big deal if the means and the motive. If you just have the means, like I have a pocket knife because I forgot it was in my pocket from like 6 months ago, not as bad as I have a pocket knife. When the police went to my house, on my desk was pictures of me stabbing something. That is a motive. So that kind of thing would send a kid for psychiatric counseling, psychiatric clearance. So we're not overreacting to the minor ones, and we're not just blowing it over either. We're making sure that the motive is not there. So all of our policies, the district has policies, all the staff have to be familiar with it, and the district also has to complete self-grading every year. We go through all these processes, and we assign ourselves a grade. These are some programs we put in place for prevention over the years. This year we did Ryan Story and Julia Cook. It was the Ryan Story, we had about 150 people there. It was well attended, and I think it was a great message. I've seen him before because I was a principal and I brought him to my school. I think he does a great job. Julia Cook is somebody that talks about positive choices and things like that. Mike Hoos is a former Union County prosecutor's cyber unit detective. And he came in and did a workshop for our kids on what happens basically when you do cyberbully somebody or send an inappropriate picture or anything like that. He came in and had a good discussion with the kids. At night, we also had a parent program. We also did this year, screenagers. Grace, do you want to mention anything about screenagers?
So that was we had a viewing of the movie Screenagers, it's a documentary that goes over and reviews different families and how they're coping with their children, having access to different technologies, iPhones and things like that. And so we got to watch different parents and how they were coping with it, and it also presented some different strategies that parents might use. I know in one example, the family set up a contract so that their daughter knew these were the boundaries that she had to work under if she was going to have her own smartphone. So it was a very good, thought-provoking film, and then afterward we got to have discussion groups for all the parents that attended. So we had different questions that people could discuss
discuss their thoughts and their experiences. So it was a good night. And then it then was shared with the middle school students as well.
Next up, these are some events we did at Valley View. We talked about some of them. Prior to school starting, one of the students was inspired to make positive message signs around the building. We did Valley View Rocks Kindness. We did Peer Buddies. We did this thing with the Jets, New York Jets Upstander of the Week, which was sponsored by the Jets. They provided tickets for kids when they were seen doing something as an upstander. We saw Week of Respect. We had this other speaker named Yaya Baker. That was supported by our Municipal Alliance. He spoke about he had positive messages about choices. Then we had the SNAP training, which is a special needs activity athletic program with the Peer Buddies. We had the Ryan story, something called Start With Hello. I went to see that. That was pretty cool. So everybody, the first thing he said to somebody was hello. So the first time you saw somebody say hello. And then we also did the No One Eats Alone Day. At Lakeview, there was back to school night. We had the social emotional learning, morning meetings. We reviewed the HIB law, morning meetings in every classroom, Week of Respect, with the Kindness Ninja, community support, season of giving, food pantry and toy collection, student leadership with the mentors, character ed, Start With Hello, and pep rally, school pride and spirit. At Riverview, same thing with the back to school night. There was discussion about all the programs. The community-wide school meeting. Mascot, they bought a rocket now. They have a mascot in the school. It's pretty cool. It promotes the spirit. This year, we're awarded one of the New Jersey schools of character. It's a federal thing, actually. We're one of 66 schools in the country to get it. It's a pretty nice honor. And the principal's been asked to speak in Washington, D.C. to a large group in the fall. So it's a really nice honor. Morning meetings, if anybody doesn't know what a morning meeting is, it's before class starts. It's a way to get social interaction with kids. Week of Respect, and we also this is reviewing the data that I was speaking about before for the United Way. So here's the personnel. Now, all districts are required to have this. All districts are required to have an anti-bullying coordinator, an ABC, and Mrs. Johnson holds that role in our district. All schools are also required to have ABS, anti-bullying specialists. So in Riverview, it's Mr. McCabe, Lakeview, Mrs. Warner, Mrs. Hall, and in Valley View, Mrs. King and Mrs. McDonald. And the anti-bullying specialist should be a school counselor, school psychologist, or other appropriately trained staff. The ABS comes from a student advocacy point of view. It's not really a disciplinary point of view. The principal handles that part. So here's the process. There's 2 slides on this, so just relax for a minute. Here's the process. Incident is either reported to the staff or by the staff. So it's either reported to someone or a staff member reports it to the principal or someone else in the district. It can be anonymous. We actually have a form. If you click on that HIB site that we showed before, if you click on it, it'll say anonymous form for reporting HIB. So you don't even have to provide your name. You can also, and we give you that, we give you information on how to report it to the police if you think it's a police matter. Then the incident is assigned to the ABS and the investigation started within 1 day. The parents of the alleged victim and alleged perpetrator are called and notified of the investigation. Initial letters are sent to parents of the alleged victim and alleged perpetrator. The ABS investigates the incident, interviews witnesses, collects evidence. The parents and witnesses are not informed. This is something that people ask about a lot. At this particular time in the code, we're not permitted to inform the parent of the people who are interviewed due to the fact that we need to keep investigation whole. And the feeling is the parents will start to talk and try to get stories together, and we won't get an accurate information from the students. Then the ABS reports the findings to the principal. The case must be finalized in 10 days. There are some exceptions. There could be an exception, for example, if it's a police matter. Sometimes, once it's a police matter, like if say it's something bad enough, like a cyberbullying thing that goes to the prosecutor's office tells you, don't talk to anybody, don't say anything, because now they're investigating, and may corrupt their investigation. So it does put it on hold. There also could be an issue with if a kid got sick or was out, like and we needed to interview them. So we do have some ways to extend that. Prior to completing the investigation, the principal may institute consequences and remedial measures if the code of conduct violations are found. So not all problems are bullying. Some problems are not bullying, but that doesn't necessarily mean they don't get consequences. So if you just go up to somebody and slap them just because you want to slap them, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bullying. It could just be a conflict, it could be a fight, but it doesn't necessarily have to be bullying. And we're going to get to what constitutes bullying in a minute. The principal's going to report the case to ABC and the superintendent. The ABC and the superintendent review the findings, the consequences, remedial measures, and ask follow-up questions. Then the superintendent may recommend additional consequences and remedial measures if needed. The superintendent reports the case to the Board of Ed with the name redacted. The Board of Education does not know who the children are that are involved. The superintendent's office then sends a second letter to the schools. We do this purposely. The letter doesn't come right from my office to the parent. The reason is we want to make sure that that parent receives a phone call with the information in the letter prior to receiving the letter, because the letter is a two-page legal document that is required that we send, but it needs explanation from the principal prior. So rather than me sending it and taking the risk that the call is in place before the letter is sent, we send it to the principal who makes the call and then sends the letter. At the next Board of Education meeting, the Board of Education approves the case, or they don't have to approve it. It hasn't happened yet. The Board of Education doesn't have to approve the case. If they don't approve it, I'm not really sure what happens. I never had to deal with that, but I think it's so much to look into it. And then the last thing is there's an appeals process. And sorry, I skipped something. There's a final outcome letter that comes directly from my office that tells you exactly what happened, how we were found. So if a parent has a child who's has some kind of HIV issue, they'll get 3 letters. One, initial letter, then the follow-up letter saying that it's been talked about on the board, and then the third letter says that what the final outcome is. And then there's an appeals process, and it's on our website too. If the parent is not satisfied with the way the investigation went or the findings or any of that, they can appeal to the Board of Education. We've had 1 or 2 hearings here. I've had maybe 1 or 2 hearings in the last district I was in. So the definition of bullying. Do you want to read this one?
So, like Mr. Forte was saying, there's pretty specific criteria that an incident has to fall under to meet the HIV incident under the law. So, I just wanted to briefly outline them to you that the incident must be motivated by an actual or perceived characteristic. It needs to take place on school property, at a function sponsored by the school, on the bus. It could happen off-site. If it's impacting the school enough, then we would still investigate it if it's the impact in school. And it must substantially disrupt or interfere with the orderly operation of the school or students' rights. So all 3 of those things we have to find. And then we need to find one of these 3 things. We need to find that the person should have known that the person that committed the act should have known that it was going to be physically or emotionally harming the student, damaging their property, or placing a student in reasonable fear of physical or emotional harm to his or her person or damage to his property. It has to have the effect of insulting or demeaning a student or group of students, or it must create a hostile educational environment for the student by interfering with the student's education or severely or pervasively causing physical or emotional harm to the student. So we have to, in each investigation, we have to think about all of these variables and see if the incident is falling under this. Maybe they hit some of those things, but it didn't meet all of them. In those cases, we'll still go through our code of conduct, even if we didn't find it to be HIV under this law. We're still going to address the behaviors that are a violation of the code of conduct. So I just wanted to have this in the PowerPoint because sometimes I've heard people say they're not sure where to find the code of conduct. It is on our website. It's in the opening day packets that parents receive, but I know you receive a lot of information, so we just like to put it out there again, that it is on our website where you can find that process and procedure.
That's a long website. This will all be posted and put in the Friday folder. So You'll even get a reminder that it's posted. So on this website, we have all of our information on presentations, we talk about the personnel. None of this stuff that I'm talking about, you have to remember. If you just click on anti-bullying on the website, all this information will come up for you. It tells you all the different presentations, including this one, on that website. Our grades for each building, the process and procedures, our policy, the anonymous bullying form, and some other resources. Students with disabilities.
Okay, so just wanted to outline for you how it might be handled if a student has a disability and they're involved in the investigation for HIV. We are required to still follow the investigation procedures from the law that are set in place, whether or not a student has a disability. We do need to still follow those same procedures that are in that law. But we do also have to consider the student's disability when we're handling consequences and remedial measures. So we really need to look at the nature of disability, and that goes into modifications to disciplinary procedures. If the student's disability perhaps impacted the action, for example, if the student was the one that maybe impulsively did something that led to a report of bullying, if that impulsivity was related to the disability, we would look at that and say, okay, what type of a consequence or remedial measure is going to be appropriate for that student based on their special needs that will be effective. So we're really looking to be effective and help the student, because that's really what we're doing for all of our students. When they're in these situations, we want them to learn and grow and not commit these acts again. So they might have a behavioral plan, or we do sometimes modify things. It's been an ask of me, do students have a safe person that will be with them during these processes? Possibly, if that's what the student needs. So for parents, I would say, if you have concerns about this, to talk to your child study team about it, because it's really handled on a case-by-case basis, how we work with the students. The other thing they should know is that it did come out in the state recs that we are, when a student has a disability, the ABS administration do need to consult with the student's case manager. That's a requirement. So those are the main areas I wanted you to be aware of for students with disabilities. Thank you.
So we just put N, because now I don't remember the last slide. So that's our last slide. And I would like to take questions from you if you have any questions regarding any of this. One thing you can't bring up is anything individual. So it can't be like a specific individual case in a group like this, because there's too much that we can't give. I can't answer. But I will stay and talk to anybody that would like to talk privately after. But please just limit questions to, process procedures, just general things. And if you want to see me after, or if you're not comfortable doing that and you want to send me an email and we'll set up a meeting, I have no problem doing that. I would love to do that with you. You all know my email address probably, and it's right on the website. It's just sforte@denville.org. If you have something specific that you want to talk to me about, or you want to talk to anybody else in the district about, I'd be happy to arrange that. But if you have general questions, please take time to do it now.
Okay, so my question is, if a student is called into the case as a witness and they do not want to participate in the conversation, do they have the right to, and say they're the only witness to the case, do they have the right to say that they don't wish to participate? And if they do, what happens to the witness in that case?
So they do have the right not to participate. There's no law that says they have to tell you. We ask them to tell you, we want your cooperation, we hope that they do. But no, we can't force them to tell you what they do. What happens then is the case continues without that witness. Sometimes it's the actual victim. As most of the time, the problem you just brought up is the victim doesn't want to give a statement. So it's very hard for us to continue the investigation without the victim's statement, but we still have to, require by law to continue.
So if there's a your question and say they have a disability or don't have a disability, and it doesn't go any further, you know, like there is no HIV found or there, but they are emotionally tarnished. Are these cases handed over to like guidance counselors so that they can be followed up on for, you know, continued support for kids?
So, in our district, if it's child on child, the investigation will be done by a guidance counselor. If it's a person with a disability, it will be done in concert with the case manager. So, can I answer the question if it's never happened? I'm not sure. I can tell you I'm aware of a bunch of times that what you brought up and the things that we put in place for children that were experiencing difficulties. And I think we get better at it as we do it too. So one of the problems is, yeah, maybe one of them fell through the cracks and the kid was upset and went home and we didn't do anything. But a lot of times the parent will call, tell us, and then guess what? The next time something like that happens, we're a little bit more on top of it. Because there have been instances, and some of us in this room are aware of the fact that there is a child that was having a hard time. We came up with a lot of different things for that child to have a counseling for a long time. So sometimes, like I said, we get better at what we're doing. And there may be times when both of those things you brought up may have not have happened. I can tell you though that we never just really just do anything and then just continue to do it. It's always a conversation, right? We talk all the time about how can we do this better. Okay.
Is there any follow-up? You know, like, so say, for instance, nothing was found, or, you know, whether or not something was found, and everything goes back to the status quo. You just stated that then the next time something would happen, then you would react differently. But instead of waiting for something to happen, is there follow-up with like a guidance counselor, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like the follow-up.
I think two things. One, I think you misunderstood because I probably didn't explain it good enough. I really wasn't talking about something else happened to that same kid. I meant we learned from that case and apply it to another case. That's maybe not have anything to do with that kid. And it could have something to do with that kid. So one of the things that we always do is, I always ask, one of my big follow-up questions on my thing is follow-up question. What are we going to do now? Like, who's going to be responsible for checking in with this kid? You know, where we would make arrangements that, you know, trying also to remember that we don't want to take kids out of their academic subjects as much as possible. We try to use that advisory period in the morning for kids to come seek help from a counselor and be able to just get some kind of support. So we definitely do that. Again, there could be times when that have fallen through, and I do think we've gotten better at this as we've learned and just continue to do this process. And one thing I can tell you here is everybody cares. Everybody cares about your kids. Your kids are my kid. My kids in the schools too. And everybody cares about your kid. I mean, it's not always like that everywhere. And it's really nice. And this is my 8th school district. I bounced around from doing different kinds of jobs. It's really a caring place. Everybody has the best interests in your kid. And if they don't, they're not really working anymore. To be honest with you. That's what happens. Yes?
Is there a statute of limitations on when a child might not have said something when it happened 4 months ago, and something may have happened, maybe not to them, but to somebody else, and it affected them again to say, hey, this kid did this to me
Okay,
4 months ago?
so here's we're going to go back to this slide here. So it has to have substantially disrupted or interfered with the child's learning. So something that happened 4 months ago, and the child wasn't bothered by it then, and it didn't impact them, it's going to be difficult for us to say that it impacted them. Now, that doesn't mean it can't, because maybe the kid's been upset for 4 months now and has been impacted that long. But if it's a one-time incident that happened 4 months ago, and the child just went along and didn't do anything about it, 4 months later remembered it, it's hard for it to meet that third criteria. Does that make sense?
And you said that the parents get 3 letters. Is that both the victim and the accused?
Yes.
Both sets of parents get 3 letters?
Yes.
And we said a copy of a redacted report goes to the board, that do parents get copies of the report?
If parents don't get a copy unless they ask for it, we don't just give it to them. But if you ask for it, we'll give you a redacted copy. The report the board gets is one page with very minimal information because I explain it to them verbally. They get a little synopsis, it's something I just started this year, so that on Mondays when I meet with them, they get it on Friday. At least they're not going in cold. They have a little bit of a background. It's usually not enough, right? Mike usually is like one that's leaving it out, but I don't give too much detail because I don't really want that floating around too much. Not that our people don't let things float around, but it's just better to just say verbally. Then we meet, we talk a little bit about what exactly happened, and the board asks me questions. I don't think there's been many cases that the board hasn't asked me follow-up questions about. Almost every case, somebody in the board asks something. They want more information than I provided for them. But they get a one-page redacted report, and the regular report is like 15 to 18 pages.
Another dumb question.
No, no.
So the board gets the report. Now, you also made mention that like names are left out and stuff so that nobody really knows. But if there's a kid that has been in multiple reporting, if they're not getting any names or anything, is there any way to show that it's like a multiple?
So that just came up recently, and the good news is we don't really have recidivists that the same thing each year. But there have been one or two occasions where there was some type of a nexus to somebody else, and I explained it to the board verbally. Meaning, even if I did give them the name, they may not remember. Like, you know, Johnny did something 3 years ago, and now he's back in front of us. But if there's been a history with the child, we explain it. If there's been a history with something to do with the child, like maybe he's not even the same kid, but somehow or another he's related to a different case, then we explain it.
I'll just make comments since I'm one of 7 non-school district parents that get a chance to hear all these cases. I will tell you that there are a lot of questions that are asked by the board. These don't just fly by. We sit in executive session and go through in detail exactly, but there's a lot of questions that are asked to Steve and even follow-up questions. One of the reasons why I think Steve started doing the reports to the board ahead of time was to get a few of the questions to him so he's prepared, because there were so many questions at some points that he would have to come back and give us answers, and it was very detailed. But I will tell you that they're taken extremely seriously, and some of the cases where we probably as a district have done the most support for students have been cases where they were determined to not be HIB in accordance with the legal definition, but they affected students, so we wanted to make sure we gave enough support to the students to make sure that they felt comfortable and weren't felt comfortable coming to school. The other thing I'll add is Steve, if you would just address, I'm thinking as a parent and as a board member, the 2 questions that probably come up the most are, can you give a little bit more information on actual or perceived characteristic? Because that's something that, it's the first thing that we as a board and the district has to basically determine, and it's pretty specific. And then the second thing is, what about incidents that happen online outside of school? Because those are happening more and are becoming a big issue for us, for the school to deal with, as well as the board to kind of understand how we deal with them in a HIB legal definition.
Thanks, that's really good. So, actual or perceived traits or characteristics have to be in a protected class. So, blonde hair is not really a protected class, but you could say your appearance is a protected class. So, sexuality is a protected class, racial, height, short, body type, all different types of things are protected classes. So, you could probably make a case for almost anything to be a protected class. Almost. Not everything, but you could make almost anything a protected class. A real or perceived means that even if the kid isn't in that category, but it's perceived that he or she is in that category, it's still considered to be HIV. Does that make sense? So even though the kid's not that, whatever it is, short, tall, right? If it's perceived that the child is that, then it can be. I hope I answered that question pretty good. perceived or real characteristic of the trait is anything in a protected class, like affirmative action type things, appearance, all that different stuff. The other one was, what do we do about HIV and cyberbullying that happens outside of school? So here's the thing about that. If your child, if the child in question who's being harassed on some type of a media, some type of a social media, if they're being harassed and it's not impacting them in school, meaning they come to school and they say, you know, everything's fine, then it's not HIV. It has to have an impact on school because we're bound by two things here. They conflict. One is we're bound by this HIV law to make sure that children are protected even outside school. But more recent case law shows that we are not allowed to punish children for things 24/7 if it doesn't have a direct nexus to the school. It came out of a case that happened in the 70s where somebody stabbed somebody. This principal had nothing to do with school. Principal suspended the kid because they were like, I don't know if you want a kid that stabbed somebody sitting in the class next to them. The parents took him to court. They won. The school won. So now the school could get involved in things outside the school day. But it has to have a nexus to the school. It got pushed in the early part of the, like 2010 to 2012. Indian Hills, Ramapo. There was a case there. Child was doing something on a weekend, the school suspended him. Like, I think he was drinking. The school suspended him on like a Saturday night, suspended him. Parents took him to court and lost. I mean, so the parents won, I'm sorry, the district lost. So now you see how we're like bound by two different types of things. We're responsible for children all the time, like in other words, if it's a nexus to the school, but if there's no nexus to the school, we're not permitted to institute any type of consequences. What we feel very strongly about, if a parent brings you that and there's no nexus to the school, we will offer you suggestions on how to solve this problem. Maybe going to the police, something like that. But it may not be our investigation because if we can't impose consequences because there's no nexus to the school, then we can't really rule on an HIV case. But we do try to help you. We won't ever turn you away. If you have a question about that, we'll always try to help. I hope I answered those two questions. They're great questions, and they're probably the biggest things that come up. So we've had cases there where there's no characteristic. You know, like there's certain things that just, you know, no matter how hard you try, you know, somebody's snack is not a characteristic. You know, it's just hard to say that that's a characteristic. So we have a lot of different things. But for the most part, you can make a case that the majority of things are protected. All right, so again, any individual things by you, family, friends, family, anybody you have, tell them to please contact me and I'll be happy to sit with them. Ms. Johnson would be happy to sit with you. Any of us would be happy to sit with you and talk about your individual issues if you have something. We're always here to try to make it better for everybody. So, any other questions? Thank you for coming. And again, this will be posted online and put in the Friday forward. Thank you.